First, Bill, on behalf of all the people who belong to the Cider magazine, I wanted to thank you for your time today. And now I guess it is my duty to introduce you a little bit. So Bill is a professor of international relations at Universidad San Francisco de Quito in Ecuador. He teaches courses on international policy, political economic, international development, international organization, Africa security and development, foreign policy, and qualitative research methods. He studied political science and economics at Duke University. He has a master's in international relations at Johns Hopkins University. And finally, he also got a PhD at Purdue Rand Graduate School on public policy analysis. His research interests include comparative governments, international development, transnational threats, and food security, among other issues. Now, the topic of today's interview is an interesting one. I think it's an important one, is multilateralism. I think it's a very—
I agree, it is an important one. And thank you for having me, Santiago.
Yeah, thank you. So my first question is, which of Trump's decisions has damaged multilateralism in international relations?
So there are numerous ones, unfortunately. I think the Trump administration, or President Trump, when you look at his foreign policy decisions, they're really a product of his worldview, such as it is. I mean, I don't know the extent to which he has a really coherent worldview, but to the extent that he does, it's America first, right? It means that the US should go it alone. We should only look out for American interests. And obviously that's not compatible with multilateralism and the idea of collective security and a lot of the ideological foundations of the post-World War II era. So I think that it's actually counterproductive to the long-term interests of the United States. So he's abdicated a lot the traditional post-World War II role of the United States and American leadership of the coalition of democracies. The US hasn't always had a moral foreign policy. We've talked a good game. Obviously, the United States has done numerous amoral things. The history of Latin America is littered with presidents who have been overthrown, democratically elected presidents who have been overthrown by the United States. But I think the United States has been at its best when it has tried to pursue a more moral foreign policy under presidents like Roosevelt, Kennedy, Carter, or Obama. But President Trump has undermined that multilateralism, and in particular the UN, at every turn. He's just this last year withdrawn us from the World Health Organization during a pandemic. That is mind-bogglingly foolish, and is going to hurt international efforts to try to address COVID-19 and the pandemic globally. In addition, he's removed us from certain key treaty obligations on essential issues, the Iranian nuclear deal 2 years ago, the Paris Accords 3 years ago. And this is going to make it more difficult for the US to conduct treaty negotiations going forward. If people don't think, if other nations don't think the United States will hold to treaties they've agreed to, they're not going to negotiate treaties with us, or they're not going to take us at our word. He's also devalued traditional alliances, especially with NATO, which is exactly what Putin and Russia want. He's playing into their hands, maybe, some say, doing Putin's bidding, but it undermines the security alliance that has helped keep the global peace since World War II. And also when you look at the threat of a rising China, that pullback, that withdrawal from international space has allowed more room for China to operate. And they've taken that room in the South China Sea with their actions in Hong Kong, and possibly with actions in Taiwan, trying to reunify Taiwan with China, which has been their long-term goal. So China wants to see a fragmented West. They want to see a discombobulated West, which makes their ascent easier and quicker, and really undermines the whole post-World War II alliance that was, NATO, the European countries, and the United States.
Yes, the NATO topic, I think, is very important because the United States should stay on NATO. NATO, it's an important organization for global peace, but Trump's decision have not made easy that decision. So my second question—
not just peace, but also democracy, right? I mean, it's a club in the charter. It says that they will promote, in addition to promoting the security of its members, that they will promote democracy. And Trump has left that by the wayside. And that's where our moral leadership has really suffered, when you don't say anything about the killing of Jamal Khashoggi by the Saudi government, when he says, oh, you started concentration camps for Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Oh, that's fine. That's what I would have done. That's a good move, Xi Jinping. These are not things American presidents have ever said before, and it's not things they should be saying.
Yeah, so my second and last question of this mini interview is it possible to repair the damage made by Trump to multilateralism, obviously, and how is it possible?
So I would say yes and no. And it depends on the issue, and it depends on the perception of long-term American politics. So I'll go through the case for yes first. Now let's assume, and let's hope, and I hope, that Biden wins in November. So he would take over at the end of January. There are a couple things that he can immediately do to restore the reputation, to restore the standing of the United States in the eyes of the international community and other countries. So first, on day one, he could rejoin the Paris Accords. And I believe he would, and he should. Climate change is no less important and no less pressing because we're dealing with a pandemic, and we still need to address those issues, and we need to do those collectively. We can't do it alone. So multilateralism remains important, and I believe that President Biden would do that. Refund the WHO. I think that would also be done on day one. Say that yes, even if the United States isn't necessarily thrilled with everything the WHO has done during the pandemic, that they're still an important organization to help coordinate the response, and that they need to be funded and supported. And also seek, and this could not be done on day one, this would take a lot more maneuvering and negotiations, but rejoin the Iranian nuclear deal. I think that was a success when it was negotiated by President Obama. I think President Trump was foolish to get out of it. So hopefully the US can rejoin that and put Iran back on a path to not seeking a nuclear weapon and not seeking nuclear destabilization. There are rumors now that potentially the Saudi Arabian government itself is seeking a nuclear weapon. They would do so because Iran had one. And so that whole region could become destabilized. Nobody wants to see a more nuclearized Middle East. So hopefully President Biden could achieve that. And more generally, to pursue a more human rights-based foreign policy. That if speaking out more forcefully on the issue of Uyghurs in China, on Saudi Arabia's various human rights abuses. President Trump talks about human rights when it suits him, against Maduro in Venezuela, or other leaders he doesn't like, but turns a blind eye to those leaders he does, like Viktor Orban in Hungary, or Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines. So that's the case for yes, but that's a lot of short-term actions. I think the case for no has to do with America's long-term standing in the world. And I think in some ways it has been irrevocably harmed, that there is lasting damage done to the American reputation because we elected a man as morally bankrupt and intellectually vapid as Trump. And that's going to damage the United States reputation. I say we because I'm American, but the US hasn't followed through with its treaty commitments. It has reneged on its promises. And who's to say that after we've elected someone like Trump, I never thought somebody as unqualified and clearly self-interested as Trump could be elected, and he was. Who's to say another figure like that could not be elected in the future and undo any repairs made by a Biden administration? So I think the faith and confidence of the international community in the United States and in its leadership has been shook, and understandably so. And I think that will take not just one Biden administration, but several administrations and several decades potentially to correct and repair.
Yeah,
if it's possible.
Yeah. So yeah, Trump has made a lot of mistakes, as we have seen. And I think the dark times come from United States, but we should stay hope that Biden wants. So that's my opinion.
Yes, I am also hopeful.
So it was a very short but profound interview, and it is always a pleasure for me to hear you. You have very interesting ideas, and you have a lot of knowledge. That it's the most important thing, and that is why I thank you once again.
Of course, Santiago, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
So yeah, that's all, folks.